Bienvenidos, Ushamdi, and welcome, CTS231, Section 841 students for the second 8-week term of the fall 2017 semester at Anne Arundel Community College. This is the Networking 4 or the Connecting Networks V6 course, and this morning's video tutorial is going to be on a Chapter 2 supplement where we're going to take a look, and this will actually be a very short video. We're going to be taking a look at Cisco's implementation of HDLC, but specifically, we're going to be talking about whether or not it is truly proprietary in the sense, and when I say truly proprietary, I mean in the sense that it won't work with other vendors. And I'll refer you to page 64 in our Connecting Networks V6 text where it says the following. HDLC is the default serial encapsulation method, and we know this, right? Because if we're on a Cisco router, so let's jump onto the command line here. So if I'm on router 1 here, and this is a Cisco 1841 router, and I go into privilege exec, and I say show run interface serial 000:0, right? Now the :0 at the end, you can go ahead and we'll put that on the back burner for now, but the reason I need that is because of the type of serial interface card that I'm using. I'm using a VHWIC, right, which can do voice and data, and I can break it into different channels, right, those DS zeros that we talk about, and combine those together, but that's what that :0 is for at the end. So we'll just ignore that for now. So you can see I've got no IP address and it's a serial interface. But what if I were to say show controllers serial 000:0? What information do we see here, right? Well, we see we've got a serial interface. Now this looks familiar, this GT96K. We see that on other types of serial interfaces as well. And then of course we get all of the register information. Now, if I was to say simply show interface serial 000:0, we get to the encapsulation, right? And what is the encapsulation? It's HDLC. And so remember, by default, the encapsulation is HDLC. And so when you look at the interface, you're not going to see the encapsulation there. In fact, if I was to go into global config and then go into the interface configuration mode for serial 000:0 and say encapsulation and do a question mark, we've seen a lot of these before, and you'll notice that HDLC is right here. So when I say encap HDLC and hit enter, then let's say do show run interface serial 000:0. Again, proving that you don't see it, but that it is the default. And even if we enter the command in, remember, it's the default. Now, this opening paragraph here at the top of page 64 continues. It says, with an added protocol type field, the Cisco version of HDLC is proprietary. And that's correct, right? It is proprietary, and Cisco took what was the original HDLC, and remember that that is a bit-oriented synchronous data link layer protocol, right? Layer 2. So it took that bit-oriented synchronous ISO standard, that International Organization for Standardization, HDLC standard, and adapted it, allowing it to carry different protocols. So IPv4 and IPv6, right? And it took that data field and it broke it down into a protocol and a data field, right? And so that's Cisco's proprietary version. And then back to the top of page 64, it says, therefore, Cisco HDLC can work only with other Cisco devices. And so this is the point that I want to stress. That's true if and only if the other vendor's device does not implement Cisco's version of HDLC, or cHDLC as it's commonly referred to, but typically when we're speaking in the context of Cisco, you're just going to say HDLC. Very rarely do you hear someone say cHDLC. It's typically just HDLC because it's assumed that if you're in a Cisco environment, you are already talking about Cisco HDLC, right? There's no need to specify between ISO 13239, right, which is the standard, the current standard for standard ISO HDLC, and then Cisco's cHDLC. And so again, I want to attack, or tackle, I shouldn't say attack, I want to tackle the statement here that Cisco HDLC can work only with other Cisco devices, because that statement is not 100% correct. And let me go ahead and demonstrate. So here we are, and we're going to stay in. I want to make sure we're in this serial 000:0. So here's what I'm going to do. So I'm in interface serial 000:0 on a Cisco 1841 router. In fact, if I say do show version, right, you can see that we're running 1533XB12, right? And so I'm going to go ahead and put an IP address on here. And we're just going to say that this is going to be 192.168. And we'll say 161.1. And I'm choosing 161 because the two routers between, or I should say, the two routers being used here, it's simply a point-to-point or back-to-back serial connection on these two routers. And it literally looks just like this. We've got router 1, and we've got router 1. And I've got my serial connection, which is just simply an RJ48 Ethernet cable, right? So it's basically a Cat5 Ethernet cable, RJ45, but it's pinned out differently. So we say RJ48, and that goes into my Juniper, right? So here's a Juniper J23, whoops, my pin froze on me, 2320, right? Older router. And in fact, the version of JUNOS, which is the operating system on the Juniper router, is 9.3, and we'll see that when we get logged in. And so here we've got a Cisco router, and we've got a Juniper router. Now, by default, Juniper uses PPP as its serial link encapsulation, because again, this is the open standard. It provides far more functionality than Cisco's HDLC, right? But the default on the Cisco side is HDLC. So when we bring this link up, we should see that layer 1 is up because it's going to be sensing that the link is there, but the layer 2 will show down. And again, this is a very common scenario when you have a mismatch in encapsulation type, which we're going to as soon as we bring this serial link up. So again, I wanted to provide you with the background, right, sort of what we're working with here in order to demonstrate this. And what I'm about to show you is not some sort of secret or hidden feature or functionality that you need to enable. It's a very commonsensical, straightforward business approach by Juniper to ensure that they can interoperate with Cisco, who is, right, that 800-pound gorilla in the networking space. So it makes great sense for Juniper to implement cHDLC, right, and to be able to support that. And so here's what we're working with. So let's dive in, let's go back to the command line here, and let's start to take a look. All right, so here we are in the command line. We'll say IP address 192.168.161 because it's between router 16 and router 1. And we will do a we'll do a /30, or I'm sorry, /24. So we'll do /24. I'll throw the no shut in there. So what about a do show run, or do show, how about an IP interface brief, and let's include serial. And so here we are, serial 000:0. And take a look at that. It is sensing that the layer 1 is up, but layer 2 is down. So the physical layer, I sense the connection here on the serial card, but over, or I should say, up above at layer 2, the encapsulation, we are down. I'm unable to successfully negotiate the encapsulation. So let's check again. Do show interface serial 000:0. We're going to look at this before we jump over to the Juniper side, right? And you can see Encap HDLC. Now, let me kick off a ping. Let's make sure we haven't configured anything, so this should obviously not work. 192.168.161.16 will be the IP on the other side. And you can see that, we have no connectivity here. So I'm going to do this in order to play well with the Juniper side, right? I'm going to say encap PPP. Now, we're not going to do anything fancy. We're not going to do PAP or CHAP. We're simply going to demonstrate that with the encapsulation set to PPP, right, which is the open standard and which is typically recommended when you're connecting to a non-Cisco router, is to use PPP. So let's kick that ping off one more time, and this time we're going to throw some numbers in there, some bigger numbers. So we're going to repeat that ping, and what is that? 234,000 times. That'll give me enough time to step over here. Now, here's our Juniper router. So Juniper definitely runs on a Unix-like kernel, and so we're sort of at a Unix style prompt, right? I could say who to see who's logged in, uptime, how long has the router been up. I could run other Unix commands, right? I could say last, and actually, okay, so it doesn't show me who has last logged in. But to get to the CLI, we simply say CLI. And so I'm in what's called operational mode, right? So think of operational mode on the Juniper as user exec, not privilege exec, but user exec mode. And interestingly enough, they both share what? Yeah, the chevron, or the greater than sign as it's commonly referred to, they share that in common because, and let me jump to a different router here, because when I first log into a Cisco router, right, there's that greater than prompt. Right, here it is, indicating I'm in user exec mode. So on the Juniper side, I'm in operational mode, which, just like user exec, doesn't give me the full configuration capabilities on the router, right? It allows me to do certain things. If I do a question mark, right, we get a very limited list of things that we could do, just like we see on the Cisco side. Right, so what's something I can do from here? I can say ping 192.168.161.1. So let me ping the other side, and it's a very Unix-like ping. And I say Unix-like because it's going to continue to ping. With Cisco, the default is 5, right? It'll send 5 pings, and then it'll die out, right, by default. With Juniper, it doesn't do that, and I do a Control-C to kill it. It doesn't do that. It's going to ping until it's done. Now, it's going to ping until I tell it it's done. Now, what we can use is this count option right here, right? And I can, obviously you can see you can scale out to a very large number of pings, but I could, if I wanted to mimic that Cisco behavior, I could say count 5, it's going to send 5 pings, and then it's done. And we go back to our prompt, and we'll give it a second here for it to come out of the count 5. Again, this is a little older router running a very much older version of JUNOS. The most recent version for this type or this platform is 12.1. So as you can see, I am way back. And this also proves that Juniper's been supporting Cisco's HDLC for quite some time. This is not a, quote unquote new thing that Juniper just implemented, right? They've been doing this for a long time. And from a business perspective, very smart choice to support not only PPP, which is the open standard, but to support Cisco's HDLC for customers that don't want to run PPP on their Cisco devices. Although, in all full disclosure, there's no reason not to run PPP, right? It gives you far more functionality and an exponential number of benefits over Cisco's HDLC. So here we are. So how do we get into, I can say config, right? You don't have to say config terminal. I just say configure or config, and this puts me into configuration mode. Now, configuration mode is sort of like, think of it as like your global config mode is really what we're in here, is sort of the global. It's like a hybrid between privilege exec and global config. And so there's a lot of things that I can do in here. And then operational mode is kind of like a hybrid between user exec and privilege exec. And what I mean by that is when you're in that configuration mode here, I can actually I can reload this router, right? With Cisco iOS, when I'm in user exec at the chevron, the greater than sign, I can't reload the router, right? I have to be in privilege exec to do that. So that's why it's kind of a hybrid. There's only really 2 modes here that we have on the Juniper side. So let's go ahead and let's configure the serial interface on the Juniper side. And so how do I see my interfaces? Well, I can say show interfaces terse. I'm sorry, let me do a run show. So and it's the same thing. When you're in global config, you have to say do show run. And when you're on a Juniper, you have to say run. And so the run is equivalent to saying do. So run show interfaces terse. And it gives me a nice breakdown here. There's a lot of extraneous stuff that'll show up, some different interfaces that pop up and things like that. And we're going to ignore those for now, but we're focused on that interface right there because take a look. We are up and the protocol is up on the link, right? On the link, we're up here. Okay. And this is different. Administratively, it means it's up. It means we don't have it disabled. Right? Just like when you go in and you do it in a shutdown on the Cisco side of the house. So that's the interface that we're going to target. So how do we configure it here? Well, I'm going to say set interfaces T1-1/0/0/0 unit 0 family inet address, and you can see putting an address on an interface. We're doing it here from sort of the top configuration level. So there is definitely a little more that needs to be typed in, 168.161.16, and I can use the CIDR notation. I love this fact about Juniper. I don't have to put 255.255.255.0 where I have many, many opportunities to make mistakes, right? I can simply throw /24 in there, hit enter, and we are done. Now, are we truly done? Let's come over here and check our pings. As you can see, nothing is happening right now, right? And that is because on the Juniper side, and I'll briefly talk about this, again, trying to drive home the point about this cHDLC, but I want to make sure I kind of pull some other things in, and I don't want to leave a whole lot of guessing as to like, well, why are you doing that? And I don't understand how come it's not working right now. So with Juniper, what I just did when I went into configure mode, I'm editing the candidate configuration. And this is a significant difference. And it's actually one that I really, really like about Juniper. And that is you're not editing the running config. Because on the Cisco side, if you make a change that maybe you remove the IP address from the WAN interface and you're SSH'd into that router, guess what? You now no longer have that SSH connection, and furthermore, you're going to have to call somebody at that site or have somebody drive to that site, possibly fly to that location to power off and back on that router so that you can get back onto it. What I love about Juniper is when you make your editing changes, I'm editing a candidate configuration, which is a copy of the running config, which is why when I put this address on this interface here, nothing happened, right? We don't have any connectivity because I need to commit, my changes. And you can there's some options that you can throw onto the commit here. I can say commit confirmed, and it will auto-magically roll it back after that time. So let's do that on this. I'll say commit confirmed, and you can see enter number of minutes until automatic rollback. So I'll put in here 4. Now it's going to commit my changes. So let's scamper over here. So it's committing those changes, right? It's putting them in, and there you go, right? It put them into the running config. And so what I did was I committed changes I made. Now the interface is up. Let's say Control-Shift-6. So I'll say do show IP interface brief and include serial. And you can see that we are up, and we clearly have connectivity. And we have connectivity using PPP, which is the default on the Juniper side, and we've configured it on the Cisco side. So if I was to say run ping 192.168.161.1, right? Take a look at that. So we've got connectivity over this serial interface. And again, we're using PPP. So let's go ahead and see what happens. And again, this is definitely the recommended way to do it. But let's see what happens here when I say Encap HDLC. And I come back over to the Juniper router and I try to run some pings. Take a look at what's happening. Right? Because I switched the encapsulation method back to HDLC, And we are up for now, but that will go down. Eventually, we're going to see that go down. There's some keep alives, and we don't talk a whole lot about the keep alives because you really don't dive, and there we go. We really don't dive into the inner workings of HDLC, and that's one of the beauties of HDLC is it just works, right? It's the default on the Cisco side. So here you can see we're up down now, right? In the interface, the line protocol layer 2 has gone down. Now, let's get to the meat of this conversation, which is all about the statement that Cisco HDLC can work only on other Cisco or only with other Cisco devices. So do show interface serial 000:0 and our encapsulation, right, is HDLC. So we're confirming that. So let's come over to the Juniper router. And actually, let me kick off a ping over here. So do ping 192.168.161.16. And let's repeat that a few times, right? So we'll throw a few pings in there. And we'll come over to the Juniper router. And we are still in configuration mode here. You see that edit, right? So it tells me that I'm editing the candidate configuration, which is a copy of the running config. So how do we change the encapsulation on the Juniper side? Well, I want to say set interfaces and T1-1/0/0. And I think it's right here actually, where there it is, encapsulation, physical link layer encapsulation. So what layer 2 encapsulations does Juniper support? And lo and behold, take a look at the very first option, Cisco compatible HDLC framing. And so what Juniper did was they basically took a look at the Cisco proprietary way of doing HDLC, right? They basically just broke that data field into a protocol and a data field, and Juniper reverse engineered it, and they can do Cisco HDLC. Well, in at least Juniper's version of Cisco HDLC. So again, it's definitely not splitting hairs, okay? So Cisco's HDLC is proprietary. Without a doubt, it's proprietary, right? But it's not proprietary in the sense that no other vendors can work with it. And I'm going to show you right now that that's a true statement, right? That Juniper and Cisco can do HDLC encapsulation between their serial interfaces, and everything is going to work without fail. So here's where I say Cisco HDLC. Now, I got to do we'll do a commit here, and I hope I didn't lose my IP address. So let's see if I was able to do it in time. So we changed the encap to HDLC, and we're committing our change right now. And so what we should see is that layer 2 connection, and there it is, right? So the takeaways from the video: Cisco's HDLC is proprietary, absolutely, but it is not proprietary in the sense that it can only work with other Cisco devices, and we just demonstrated that here. We've got a Juniper J2320, and I think I did a show version. Whoops, run show version, right? You can see it right here. It's a J2320 JUNOS 9.3. So we've got a Juniper router, and if I were to go to edit interfaces, T1-100 and say show, right? I've got a Juniper router running their flavor of Cisco HDLC, right? Their Cisco HDLC compatible version with a Cisco router, and we have no issues at all. So run show interfaces terse, right? What is my T10? What do I look like right here? There we go. And pay no attention to that .0. I'm not going to get into that. That's that unit number that you see me putting on there. So you can see right here, we're doing iNet, which is their IPv4, and there's my address, and we are up. We're not having any issues. Let's ping over to 192.168. Whoops, I got to do a run. Ping 192.168.161.1. And there you have it. And we'll let the pings sort of take us out of the video here as we transition back to the cover slide. So again, it is not that Cisco's HDLC does not work with any other vendors or only works with Cisco devices. That is not a true statement. You can certainly use it with Juniper devices, but again, in all reality, you're probably going to be using PPP for the reason that PPP not only supports error detection, but error correction. It supports PAP and CHAP authentication, right? So there's many more features with PPP, and that's probably what's going to be implemented. But I wanted to make sure that we covered this so that you're aware that you can do HDLC between different vendor routers with Cisco and other vendors. In this case, specifically Juniper, and smart business decision to support that, because you may have a lot of customers that for whatever reason don't want to run PPP. They simply want to plug and play, right? Plug the serial connections in and they come up on Cisco routers, right? We want to do that same thing, but with the Juniper router, and they support that. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching. Let's move into Chapter 3 now, where we're going to be talking about eBGP, GRE, generic routing encapsulation, and some other topics. Have a great weekend, and I will see you on Tuesday night.